You're welcome back. It's talk time. Nigerians are waiting anxiously for the time when the Nigeria Labour Congress, also known as the NLC, would make real its demand for 56,000 naira minimum wage for its workers.
And let's take this reaction.
That is not geared towards the promoting the economic standard of the people you are governing, then you can as well decide to resign because you are not fit to govern. It's not about reducing the minimum wage of the workers. It is about finding out other means of meeting their economic standard.
Every governor of each state in this Nigeria should be creative. I think creativity I'm talking about is trying to diversify the economy of the nation.
As of now, fuel is 150, 170. And somebody who is going home with 18,000 naira, which cannot even buy a bag of rice out of it. You want to reduce it to what? Or you want to push more masses, more people more masses to hardship. The moment hardship continue, of course, you know the implication of that in this country. And the population is outgrowing every day.
The implication is that they are going to cause more harm to the civil servant because some of them will not be able to, for now that they are collecting 18,000 naira, they've not been able to take care of their children. Then when you bring it down again, automatically it's going to affect the life of such family more.
We have heard from the Labour said there's no way that can happen. Labour is even clamoring for increase in minimum wage. So instead of them to reduce that, maybe let them reduce the number of essays and all those things they have. Some of them have senior special advisors. Some of them have special advisors, senior on one issue. So instead of that, let them reduce it and make sure they pay this minimum wage to the workers.
I guess the workers, they will be unable to foot for some bills because due to the country economy, we all know that present in Nigeria, everywhere is so tied up. And if it's being reduced, some of them, I guess most of them, as you see them, so they are indebted to one or two people which they are looking for money to even pay. So if it's being reduced, there's no way they can foot the bill.
All right, joining us now from our Abuja studio is the General Secretary, Nigeria Labour Congress, Peter Esan. Many thanks for joining us today on TVC Breakfast. Many have asked, since your last demand, are you still willing to fight for the increase in the minimum wage?
Oh, clearly, the demand for the increase in the minimum wage was made based on a number of considerations. One was that the minimum wage, by the understanding of the last negotiation before the 2011 Minimum Wage Act came into force, was that there would be a review at least every 5 years. 5 years have passed. But more importantly than that, when you look at all the indices that determine the condition of living of the worker, those indices have changed drastically since the fixing of the last minimum wage. You do not want a minimum wage in an economy to be such a poverty wage that the workers are living in abject poverty. If you look at the real wage that 18,000 naira represented in 2011, today, if you make adjustments for the changes in the cost of living index, that figure, what will give the same value as 18,000 in 2011, is certainly not what we have today. It is way above 45,000 naira. So we need to take all these into consideration, because you see, the wage is not just something that, like water that flows under the table and that is the end of it. What the wage does, and when you have a living wage or a reasonable wage, is that it helps to stimulate aggregate demand in an economy. And that helps to, tackle the problems of the economy. Producers will find effective demand for their products, and therefore they will produce more. And all these are the things that need to be taken into account. Clearly, there is an urgent need for the review of the minimum wage, and Labour is demanding of government that the proposal has been with government now since about April last year. And there is an urgent need, therefore, for government to do what is required, and that is to set up the tripartite committee that will then look at all the issues, including ability to pay by employers, whether public or private, before a figure can be set.
Mr. Esan, we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll dig even deeper into this particular issue this morning. Stay with us. All right, you're welcome back. We're looking at the NLC's call for increased minimum wage, and our guest in Abuja studio is the GenSec NLC, Peter Ozon Esan. Well, before we go in further, let me go to the wall and give you a broad view of what the journey has been like. Of course, last year, 2016, October to be precise, the Labour President Yuba Waba did say that in the midst of recession, there's no better time for government to increase minimum wage. Presently, of course, the minimum wage stands at 18,000 naira. In 1998, the minimum wage in Nigeria was 3,500. By year 2000, the minimum wage was split into two, with federal government workers earning 7,500, while state governments paid 5,500 minimum wage. Now, in 2011, the national minimum wage was reviewed to the present 18,000 by the Jonathan administration, and former President Jonathan signed the National Minimum Wage Act into law, with a 5-year reopener clause for fresh negotiations or review, as the case may be. But before the enactment of the NLC law, the NLC had demanded for 52,000 naira minimum wage in 2008, but the government turned deaf ears, and Labour also made fresh demands of 56,000 naira minimum wage before the country plunged into recession in 2016. Now, they gave the federal government an ultimatum till May the 1st, 2017 to implement the new wage, else they would embark on a nationwide strike. Now it is left for us to wonder if indeed government would heed to their demands, or the Labour would make bold its threat to down tools in May. That's about 3 months from now. Now, let's take this discussion a notch further. Okay, if this will move, it doesn't seem like it. All right, anyway, the minimum wage is 18,000 naira, and that means an average civil servant will have to live on this salary until government reviews the demands by the Labour. That's if government considers the 56,000 naira demand. But then there are questions as to if that would even be enough to cater for their needs. We'll look deeply into this. But let me quickly bring in the GenSec here of the NLC. Now, it almost seems that the NLC may be coming to the party really late. 56,000 naira at a time of recession, and of course you have inflation that's to down tools in May. That's about 3 months from now. Now, let's take this discussion a notch further. Okay, if this will move, it doesn't seem like it. All right, anyway, the minimum wage is 18,000 naira, and that means an average civil servant will have to live on this salary until government reviews the demands by the Labour. That's if government considers the 56,000 naira demand. But then there are questions as to if that would even be enough to cater for their needs. We'll look deeply into this. But let me quickly bring in the GenSec here of the NLC. Now, it almost seems that the NLC may be coming to the party really late. 56,000 naira at a time of recession, and of course you have inflation that's way close to the 20s. That's around 18.55% right now as we speak. And who knows what it will look like by the first quarter of this year. Now, 56,000. How realistic is that in the scheme of things?
Well, you know, when we made a proposal to government and demanded 56,000 naira, it was based on some computations. 3 alternative computation mechanisms were adopted, and at the end of the day, we took an average of those. Many of the factors on which computation was based, like cost of living index, inflation and all that, have changed drastically since that time. And what is important is not the figure that, whether it's 56 that we demanded or whatever. What is important is for the process to be convened. And in the process of working together, the representatives of labor, the representatives of employers in the private sector, and the representatives of employers in the public sector, which is government, will then be able to look at all the issues and on the basis of the reality of the moment, then decide on what is the correct figure to recommend. This was what was done in the 2011 case, for example. The demand that was made was not what was implemented. What became the minimum wage was the outcome of the working of the tripartite committee. Some studies were even commissioned in the process of determining that. And from the side of government, and we need to emphasize this, that the minimum wage is not a government matter. It is a wage that must be paid, whether by private employers or by public sector employers. And so when we confuse the minimum wage with just civil servants, we miss the point. And I think it is important that we place this in proper perspective. So what the figure would be, I have just read a study that was commissioned by an international organization to do a study of what a living wage would be in Lagos.
A living wage, remember. All right, Mr. Ozoeson, just hold on there. Let's reel out some more information. Of course, former President Olusegun Obasanjo had talked about this living wage that Mr. Ozoeson just referred to now. Nigeria's inflation rate accelerated to its highest in 2016, triggering a rise in the prices of food, commodities, rent, transportation, electricity, and other basic needs. Now from 9.6% in January 2016 to 18.4% in December. As you can see the graph there, January 2016 to December of 2016, 18.5. Now, Mr. Ozoeson, there are many Nigerians, Busolami, who are actually asking, this is a recession time. How realistic is it for the NLC to continue to insist that government should increase minimum wage? Looking at 2016, last year, government had to bail out so many states, some 27 or so of them, for the simple reason that they could not pay the minimum wage, which is presently at 18,000. So how realistic is it? Shouldn't labor be fighting other things and leave this 18,000 naira alone?
No. You see, we are not an island unto ourselves. Let me start with an example. When President Obama came to power in the U.S., there was a deep recession in the U.S. One of the things he did was to canvass for an increase in the minimum wage as a policy of fighting the recession. And when the House did not go along with him, what did he do? He used executive power to then say that only companies that paid a higher minimum wage of $9 per hour would then get contracts from the federal government. And so that helped to fight the recession. And that's what I alluded to earlier. that part of the problem of a recession is the downturn in aggregate demand, effective demand. People are earning so little that they cannot purchase goods. And if they cannot purchase goods, then the goods producers of goods will find inventories building up, and therefore they will not be, and that is what is a recession. So if you want to fight a recession, you stimulate aggregate demand. And one of the ways of stimulating aggregate demand is through an increase in the minimum wage. Let us also please emphasize that when we keep referring to governors who could not even pay the minimum wage, it is a matter of the priorities that they set and their capacity to manage. We also need to emphasize that the minimum wage, and I mentioned this earlier, is not a matter for civil servants. It is a matter for all workers in the economy, including the private sector. And so we cannot continue to use the incapacity of governors to govern effectively to determine whether minimum wage is desirable or not. Why do you want a situation in which you pay a minimum wage to a worker which will not be sufficient to pay his transport costs to work for the working days of the month? Does that make sense? I think we need to be realistic and realize that the fact of the recession does not whittle down the importance and need and necessity for the review of the minimum wage. If anything, the recession actually makes more urgent the need to review the minimum wage.
All right. In the 2017 budget, there is no provision for the minimum increase in the minimum wage. People have said, okay, perhaps there could be a supplementary budget. But the government has made some provision, like the 500 billion naira social intervention fund to go to help people, 13 billion naira for housings for civil servants, and some other intervention. Perhaps the government has another direction to reflect the economy beyond what you're saying.
No, it is not. Reflecting the economy is not a unidirectional matter. You cannot say because it has put funds for housing, then workers will earn wages that will make them perpetually poor and incapable of even being productive. The fact that the minimum wage provision was not put in the budget is not, for me, it's not a problem at all. It is even logical. You could not have put provision for the minimum wage in the 2017 budget when you have not yet negotiated and determined the minimum wage. It is when you have determined the value of the minimum wage that you can then talk of the quantum that you require to put in the budget. And that can always come through a supplementary budget. So that, to me, is not a problem. In terms of budgeting, technically, it is correct that it is not in the budget because you cannot put an X on determined amount in the budget. You need to know the value of X before you put it in the budget. So that is not a problem.
All right.
Sometime last year, just let me chip in this question quickly.
We'll have to continue that discussion tomorrow
let me
because
quickly
there's
chip in this
yes,
question. Yeah. Last year, when this recession hit, the president of NLC, Ayuba Waba, said the Nigerian Labour Congress will help the government see an alternative to recession, perhaps find solution to recession. We don't know what the NLC have done to help government come out of recession in terms of sabotage, in terms of ghost worker, scammer found in the civil servant. Your take on that, please.
Well, we have been quite open and vocal on the problem of the what do you call it? The ghost workers. We have continuously, and not just this government, way before this government, we have continued to canvass with government the need to properly streamline the payroll so that this syndrome of ghost workers can perpetually be laid to rest. But more importantly, we have argued and we continue to argue that since government has periodically told us that it discovered so many ghost workers and removed them from the payroll, how many people have been prosecuted? Because people were receiving these salaries in the past. We need to make an example of people who were abusing the system. So we do want to be clear about the sincerity of government when it actually brings about. If you have discovered 1,000 ghost workers, at least don't trace through the salary profile and the banks, those who have been collecting that money, prosecute them. We have not seen a single case of such prosecution.
Okay.
So we still continue want to work with government to ensure that all these holes are plugged and that no hemorrhage is actually taking place.
Yes.
With respect to the issue of vandalism and pipeline and all that, well, these are parts of the challenges you face in a country. And these are not separate from the arguments we are making, even about the minimum wage. You cannot expect a country where the majority of the people are earning salaries that cannot feed them to then have security. So the issues of security are also tied in with the issue of appropriate remuneration. And all these need to be taken as a package and not just isolated compartmental issues. We are still ready. As a matter of fact, right now, the NLC is working to hold a summit or a labor summit. We are planning a labor summit in the next few months to converse ideas. We had done a study before. We brought people together and did a study on the economy. We wrote to government and asked for opportunity to engage. We have not been given such opportunity.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. The Secretary General, or General Secretary, as a matter of fact, of the NLC, Peter Esan, if you would oblige us, we would, of course, like to have you look at this even further with us tomorrow, because there's hardly enough time to even begin to scratch the surface today. So it would be pleasure to have you join us again tomorrow if you can. Of course, we'll be asking about how labor came about this particular figure of 56,000 and of course more, really. And so much more. That's how we wrap the show this morning on TVC Breakfast. How time flies when you're really engrossed in these issues, very important as they affect you and I. Well, I am Ngozi Alebu saying thanks for joining us. Let's see you again tomorrow.
And I am Busolami Tunwashe. Bye for now.